There is no perfect, for perfect is another word for absolute in the Abrahamic metaphorical language. There is world and man relating to it with his mind, with his entire becoming. The word perfect is an approximation. The word in general is an approximation. The symbol is an approximation, a representation, like the number, referring to patterns in the world, referring to natural order. Patterns are metaphorically symbolized as gods, spirits, and given a name, a symbol, to represent convergences of patterns. To this order man must abide as he would to God's, because to this order he owes his existence, and to this he will return. Words, if they are artistic, connections between noumenon and phenomenon, keep man focused, his mind attuned, clear. With them he relates to nature, and not to human abstractions, which may seduce him, lead him astray, manipulate and exploit his needs, his emotions, his desires. Words free from this discipline, this external connection, this external order, become methods of evasion, of hiding, of self-comforting, and pleasure-seeking, self-pleasuring. They make of themselves a god, and all those who fall to their calling, slaves to human artifices. Words are not an understanding. They are a reference to patterns, which are the foundations of understanding. Words are art. All language is man connecting himself, his ordering, to flux, to the parts that display patterns. Flux being the word which we use to symbolize interactivity, interactivity of patterns and non-pattern dynamic processes. Man does so by first projecting what he knows in himself, what he feels in himself, outward. How this external phenomenon or convergence of patterns make him feel is how he represents it. What makes a man a willing slave is when he conveniently believes the words are the phenomenon represented, and not merely representations, because then, with no external natural standard, he becomes vulnerable to wordsmiths, to manipulators, to charlatans, those who use words to evoke emotions, desires, hopes. The word user becomes the standard, placing words in whatever order suits his goals, limited by nothing outside his own needs, his own motives. A mind with no understanding of what words are falls prey to their effect. He becomes a minion to whatever or whomever infects him with the, quote, right reaction to specific words. When the word, the symbol, the metaphor, referring to an abstraction, a noumenon, cannot be referred to a phenomenon, an objective, in the world, then the objective should be sought elsewhere. If the objective cannot be moved towards, then the movement towards it should be sought elsewhere. In other words, the motive should be sought elsewhere. Love, another one of those modern favorite words they obsess over. We see it everywhere. We see it in movies. We see it, we hear it in pop songs, in sitcoms, in art, everywhere. We hear about love, its power, its effect, its divine sanctity. And yet, there is so little love in the modern. Because for the modern, love is just the word. It's an empty word, usually confused with the word lust. Or it is a word so extraordinary in his mind, so divine, so godlike, that he inflates it to a proportion that then he can't fail but be disappointed by the outcome. He has put it in on such a romantic pedestal that nothing can, in the real world, can meet the standard he has created as an abstraction in his own mind. Or, like I said, he confuses love for lust, which usually doesn't last too long, or it is as shallow as the the period required for the beginning and the end of flirtation and copulation. Whenever you hear people talking about love or any subject in this fantastic, exceptional, extraordinary way, when it is inflated to such an extent that it becomes magical, extraordinary, supernatural almost, then you can expect the reverse to be the case. Because hyperbole is like a peacock tail. Its intent is to transmit a message to the listener. It's not genuine. It's meant to impress. This is why for the Christians, love is another name for God. So God loved the world into existence. So already you know that for the Christians, their love is a big lie they cannot live up to. They don't understand because they've mystified it, and they cannot abide by. It's just another word that they are inspired by, perhaps they want to submit to, but they have no comprehension of. And since they have no comprehension, no rational understanding of it, they always fail in expressing it or reaching it or attaining it, because it's not attainable by any earthly creature. It is not of the world, of the cosmos. It is beyond it. But that's the whole point. For the Christian, the failure is inevitable. It is part of their faith. They have to fail in the attainment of the absolute, which is non-existent, in order to feel ashamed of this fact, to feel like they deserve punishment, to justify why they suffer in the world, and then to seek redemption in their God. And that's the whole point, isn't it? As with all words moderns use, nihilists use, it cannot be found in the world itself. It's not a phenomenon one can find in the world. It's a noetic construct. It exists in the brain as some vague concept, as this perfect, ideal thing that nothing can blemish nothing of the outside world can blemish, because it never applies to the outside world. It is a personal, esoteric thing, which each individual understands in his own subjective way, and is constantly failing to meet, to find it in the outside world. So he's always in a state of dissatisfaction, alienation, and that's what the whole purpose, at least for the Christian concept of love, is. And this is where the possibility of manipulation, exploitation of stupidity comes in, because the individual who sells the mind, who infects the mind with this conception of love or any word disconnected from reality, who sells them on this romantic idealism, knowing that this person will fail to find this because it doesn't exist. It has been detached from from its reality, from its original reference point, and it's become this divine thing, this magical thing. Because he knows he will never find it, he then presents himself as the one who can guide the other towards finding it. So the other feels ashamed, embarrassed, like the buffoon who, upon seeing scribblings on the museum wall, on a canvas, of course, and is told that this is high art, and unable to comprehend it because it's all bullshit gibberish, it's a marketing ploy, he pretends he understands, or he feels a little embarrassed and he seeks the guidance of an expert, an art connoisseur, to tell him what he's supposed to be seeing in the art piece, which is again total bullshit. It can be anything to anybody, just lines, and the artist just names it some pretentious thing, and then sells it to idiots, to gullible idiots. The modern mind, having been detached from past, from nature, is now told that the word cannot, the meaning of the word love in this case, cannot be connected to anything in past nature. So already he's dismissed that option. He will not accept it. He considers this connection a diminishing of the magical power of the word, of the concept. He prefers the word to remain this God-like, well, there is another name for God, this divine power, this mysterious force, which one day he might get a taste of, or he's tasted in the form of sexual frenzy, inebriation, or perhaps he's felt it when looking into his child's eyes and seeing himself as if he were detached from himself, a sense of enlightenment, reaching the third and fourth levels of a cognition, but not understanding what this means. Because when you look into your child's eyes, you see yourself there, you see part of yourself there, and it's a bizarre sensation of seeing yourself from an external vantage point. Without an earthly connection of what love is, all the modern has is the sensation to grab onto, to feel it, as he does every other word. He feels words, he doesn't understand them, he doesn't connect them to the world, he just connects them to himself, where they bubble out as if they are magical from inside of him, coming out from inside as if they came out of nowhere, as if they came out of thin air, like magic. Nothing can diminish his love, he thinks. Nothing can blemish it by connecting it to something as mundane as reproduction or genetics or past or nature or to animal behavior. No, his love is divine, magical. Nobody can relate to it. Nobody can feel it the way he does. He's forever the only one who feels this kind of love, this magical, mystical kind of love. It's almost as if the word itself was only meant for him and him alone. He holds on to it like a talisman, like a safekeep, close to his heart. He calls it his heart. But like all things disconnected from the world, it needs validation from somewhere. It needs something to justify it, to acknowledge it. So he seeks this justification in others. So he makes of his love a universal love, a love that all deserve, if only they understood it like he does, if only they can appreciate it like he does. Much has been said about love, and undoubtedly much more can be said about love. But for the purposes of this series, we will do what we've done with all words, and we will do with all words, and that is bring them back down to earth, unload them of all the baggages they've acquired over the years, most of it nihilistic, lies, romanticism, delusions, naive sensations rooted in desperation, fear, anxiety. So the first thing we realize about love is that it emerges out of what we call lust. And lust emerges out of what we call the feeding mechanism. And that's why we see much of lust displaying these behaviors, biting, sucking, and so forth, which we associate with feeding. But that's another topic, which we will not get into here. So love, out of this lust, love has the first function of serving a reproductive role. That is, it facilitates heterosexual reproduction. And it does so by intervening, numbing, if you will, softening, soothing, calming the stress, the energies collected and maintained in waiting for the fight-flight mechanism. This is why heterosexual copulation is finalized with a spasm, orgasmic spasm, releasing all these energies. So the first, like I said, the first function of love is to make heterosexual reproduction possible. And this is so because you can imagine a smaller female, most often a smaller female, being approached by a much larger male. And if we think about the copulation mechanism where a penis is inserted inside the vagina, or there's a penetration occurring, this is an intrusion that goes against the survival instinct. So love, the first function of love is that. The second one emerged out of this, which is the parental bonding kind of love, where here we have a form of identifying self with other, which begins with an identification of self in other through the smell, through appearance, texture, whatever that may be, depending on the species. So the identification of self in other then enables the parental sacrifices required to protect and to bring to term, protect, and then wean an offspring, requiring years of risks and years of sacrifices by the parent. Now this eventually evolves in what we call the social mechanism, which enables cooperative unions, and this too relies on an identification of self with other, through first by genetic similarities, and later this is abstracted as an identification of self with idea. So now the idea becomes the identifier, and the individual can sacrifice self for this idea because he identifies with an idea of self as a grander self.